welcome everybody. Thanks for spending your Friday lunchtime with us. Today, it's our great pleasure to turn the spotlight onto cybersecurity careers. We're having a bit of a cybersecurity focus, bit of a cybersecurity month here at ClickStart. Anyway, without any further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome Steve Erskine. Steve is the head of cybersecurity for the UK public sector service line within the global IT services business, DXC Technology. And Steve, welcome. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us today.
Thanks for the
And
invite.
I wonder if we might start our conversation today by just having a little bit of a chat, if you wouldn't mind maybe introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your role without betraying any secrets, of course, and perhaps a little bit about DXC Technology and what DXC do.
Okay, so hi, I'm up in Glasgow. You can tell by the accent I'm not Scottish, originally from the northeast of England. I work for DXC Technology, who are a global company, and I'm head of one of the heads of cybersecurity across the business. So my pathway, and I like to talk about pathways. So my pathway started by I was 24 years in the Royal Corps of Signals. And then I eventually left the military and joined industry and went into project and project management, where I was heavily involved in building and designing IT infrastructure to support the business. That really led me into lots of areas of computer science and how systems work. And then probably Jane, is it 5, 6 years ago now? I was very
Yeah,
fortunate
yeah.
enough to, through Skills Development Scotland, to undertake an MSc in cyber. It's where first met Jane actually,
It's,
which was a bonus, right?
yeah,
And
that's
yeah,
very
so
kind.
I did an MSc in cybersecurity through the Open University. Um, I was working in cloud at the time in DXC, and after my MSc, I was asked to move over to cybersecurity. So there is my pathway from Army, project management, MSc into cyber.
Yeah, and it's really nice, I think, to hear because I know that there's so many different routes in. I mean, I always think we work in an area that's, it's pretty fabulous that there's lots of ways that you can enter the information technology sphere and indeed the cyber sphere, which I consider to be in many ways a subset of that. Although I know, as you and I have talked about many times, cybersecurity is everybody's job, isn't it? Whether you're working in an IT role or you're not, it's just that your role is or your cybersecurity knowledge and skills that you need just varies with role. It needs to be role appropriate, but having that understanding of how systems work, is really quite critical, isn't it? As you're working in many cyber roles, so you kind of need that foundation first before you think about moving into it. Would you say that's fair?
I think there's 2 points there, Jane. I think first and foremost, your point about people, it's everyone's responsibility. What I would say right now is that people supporting the technology behind cyber to, keep the bad adversaries out of our systems. It, the people are our first line of defense. Okay.
Yes.
Even even today, when we think about what's going on in the world and the fact that we've got state-sponsored cyber adversaries who will have all of the support and money behind them to deliver elaborate, advanced, persistent threats. They still go after the soft underbelly, which is spear phishing and phishing, and try and use the most cheapest way to cause a breach, which is via the human element. Right. So it's not an insider threat, it's an external threat, and they will try and trick you.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm thinking too, probably the most prominent cyber story in the media right now, which is, the M&S disruption,
Absolutely.
which
That's
is
why
still
it's why
kind
there's
of
many
rolling
shelves in
on.
the co-op are empty at the moment, if anyone's
Yeah,
noticed that. And I think the second point is to be involved in cyber, you really need a grounding in computer science. You need to know how things work. Whether if so, if you have aspirations to be an engineer in cyber, you really need to know how the protocols communicate with each other. You need to understand how systems work together. Most systems that are designed these days to support the underlying business, that's why we have IT, right, is predicated on companies like Microsoft and Google and AWS and we don't reinvent the wheel there. We use well-known technology and that builds a system that supports a business. Cyber is a horizontal along the bottom, actually layered all the way through the system, but it is there to deliver the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data.
yeah. The CIA
The CIA.
principle is,
Yeah.
yeah. We're not talking about Central Intelligence
We're not.
Agency in this context,
They're
are we?
probably involved somewhere,
Yeah.
but no.
Yeah, but those are kind of the core principles. And actually,
Yeah.
I suppose, what we're really doing and what we need to think about is data, isn't it? We are, and in some cases, available, the availability is the availability of service. So, going back to M&S, we don't have their website up and running at the moment. We can't order from it. We've got that denial of service happening with it. Yeah, I think that's a really great way to look at it, actually. I don't know if I'd looked at it quite that way before, with that kind of. And it also brings me back to a conversation I overheard with, a government official who said, if you think technology is, the answer, you don't understand the problem.
Correct.
Like you say, it's really important that we've got these core systems that are there to support it. But I think it is about, all of us having an understanding of how we can try to protect ourselves,
Yes.
the organisations we work for. And also, I suppose there's an awful lot of systems and processes that are required to make sure that everything's all joined up and that we are able to identify vulnerabilities. We're able to identify activity really quickly. And what would you say about that? Because I guess that's a kind of a
Yeah.
different role. And does that have a bit of a different mindset to perhaps
Well,
folks that are looking after the actual technology?
what feeds all of the roles, and we'll go through those in a moment,
Yeah,
is the fact that there is a threat that exists. And the threat actors could be anything from your bedroom script kiddie all the way through to, government-backed, politically motivated groups. And they are always looking for vulnerabilities in the system to exploit. Now, the risk management area of cyber is looking at the techniques and practices of adversaries. They're looking at the likelihood of a breach, and they're looking at what the impact might be. Now, the adversary, of course, is we hear more and more. I've yet to see it, but I've no doubt it has happened that the adversary is starting to weaponize themselves with using AI.
yeah,
And the only way to fight AI is with AI.
AI, right?
Now, a lot of AI, agentic AI, if you like, which is almost self-learning, you can leverage that from the system design that you create that is governed by cybersecurity policy as well. So we often talk now about creating a unified platform, which
Mm,
is looking at, and what I would commend everyone to look at is the NIST cybersecurity framework, which looks
mm,
very much at you have to identify your crown jewels, or the assets that are underpinning the data flows, right? You have to protect with defense in depth and think about the onion layer peeling back the onion layers where the crown jewel is in the middle and all of the onion layers are there on the outside to protect. That's defense in depth. So, so understand where your assets are, protect them, but we better detect what's going on in the system, in the network for, activity that is not planned.
Mm.
And even after doing all of that now, the cyber industry is talking about, yeah, but the bad boys might still get in, right? So
Yeah,
you better
absolutely.
prepare for that, and you be able to respond and then recover. And what NIST have just done is introduced a govern layer around all of that. If you look at the NIST framework, that does really give you a good awareness of all of the areas of cyber. So within that, there are many roles, which I think is getting to the part to answer the question
Yeah,
really. So typical roles in DXC are governance, risk and compliance. We have
yeah,
security operations centers that are doing offensive cyber. So they're monitoring, they're ingesting threat intelligence, they're ingesting all of the telemetry from tooling at the endpoint, and other information that is fed into the SIEM. So SOC's really important. If you look at the different full stack layers within a system, so you've got application security, you've got middleware security, you've got network security. So there's lots of subject matter experts that will specifically work in a particular area. And then, of course, you've got forensics, and I've written a few down, right, because there's so many. You've got audit and compliance and testing, you've got threat assessment, you've got data protection, privacy, vulnerability management, and somewhere within all of that, architects, engineers, and analysts will fulfill a role.
yeah. And it's a lot, isn't it? And I suppose,
Yeah,
in terms of
it really is.
the direction of travel, if I just think about over the last 10, 20 years, the number of endpoints that we have now has just
Mm.
exploded, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Um, and of course, excuse me, we've had the advent of big data. So of course, there's so much more that we want to protect. And I remember talking to a risk expert recently, and when you were talking then about the NIST framework, and you're thinking about, well, what are your crown jewels? He was saying to me that the reality isn't if, it is when.
Yes.
So really and honestly think about what is absolutely critical for you to protect. And because it might be, actually, much as we hate to say it might be that you can't protect everything, or certainly not with the same level of resource. So you have to really be quite, I suppose, quite disciplined in kind of focusing in on that. Would you say that that's the reality on the ground? Is
It
that
is, yeah, yeah. The reality on the ground is if you were to apply every single lockdown protocol controls, the system supporting the business would be too difficult to work, and people would start to, you know, find ways round, which is what you don't want to happen, right?
yes.
So again, back to threat, risk, likelihood,
Mm,
impact. You have to create the right, you have to generate cyber resilience and create the right cyber security posture. The question comes, how much is enough? Yeah. And so that maturity model and continually looking at the threat landscape, the tactics and techniques of adversaries, looking at the attack typical attack vectors. What we're starting to see now. Now, if you speed that up, if you put that on steroids, that's the AI weaponized adversary. So the
yeah,
only way now is to have a unified platform that is proactively interrogating that information, looking at, well, if an adversary got to this point, that's a choke point, and the blast radius to get from there, once they've got to that point, they can get anywhere in the network, and God help us, right? So
Mm,
now the use of agentic AI is trying to become proactive and head off
yes.
the adversary. And I think the other, so that's AI, and people talk about AI all the time, you know.
Yeah.
That's my
This,
AI
this is the
pitch for
year of
cyber,
AI.
right? Use
Mm,
AI to fight AI, right? Of course, there's many other
yeah.
uses, right? But the other thing, of course, is quantum resilience,
Okay. Tell us
right?
about that.
Well, what I often say to customers is that if you need your, back to the CIA triangle, if you need your data to be confidential today, right? Are you happy with your cybersecurity posture, your policies, your procedures, and what's in place? But now let's fast forward 10 years. Does that data still need to be confidential? And if that's the case, you need to become quantum resilient, and you need to start on that quantum resilience journey now to understand, again, I'm back
Mm,
to NIST, identify, know where all your assets are, right? Understand what functionality they have and what needs to be put in place to be resilient by, 2020, I think it's 2028, where they want, people to be, ready-ish.
so
There are
just
many
again.
roadmaps. But
Yeah,
see,
that's
the other thing
explain
as
the
well,
proactivity
real
stuff. Yeah.
quick,
Yeah.
this is where cyber meets ITIL. I always
Okay.
think about, understand computer science, right? How systems work and hang together. Understand the the threat landscape and what's going on in the world, and then understand how the likes of the ITIL framework is used to govern a system that is live. Because cyber and ITIL go hand in hand. If you think about, and I'm back to identify, I'm big on identify, right? In ITIL, you've got the CMDB, right? So if you haven't got an accurate CMDB, how do you know whether you're protecting all of your assets? And that discipline comes from ITIL. Now there are tools in cyber that will, discover all of your assets, but fundamentally that comes from the concept of know where your assets are, because if you don't and you are breached, how can you understand the impact and where the assets are deployed, and perhaps understand where your cyber resilience sits and isolate the network if need be without knowing where all your assets are? So that's where cyber draws from ITIL. And then
Yeah.
equally, if you're doing change management
Yes.
happens all the time. Cyber's interested in, okay, has the change resulted in an increased or reduced threat landscape? Have we introduced a new attack vector? So you're constantly thinking about the impact on the system you're trying to protect by what's going on around the business.
Yes, and from what you're saying, it feels like, we need to have one foot in the present and also one foot in the future,
Yes.
because as you say, and I think somebody once said to me, it's a bit like yin and yang. Think of it like that. As one position changes, whether that be defensive or offensive, so the other must change. And that's what's happening, isn't it? So if we get really good at defending our systems, then bad actors will try and find other ways in, and vice versa. And I think what you're saying when you're talking about quantum resilience, which, and I can see there's a question in the chat about
See,
that.
Dave's got one in there, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's very much about thinking about, well, where is computing going to go? You talked about a 10-year time frame, I think, when you were talking about this. And what does that mean in terms of how you plan, proactively, what that posture might be and what that system might look like? The second part of the question is really good, isn't it? How can you actually achieve it? And I guess that's the million
That's
dollar
some
question,
question,
right?
Jane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's some question, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that you ever. That perhaps the question is. I don't know that you do ever achieve it, because you get to a position, but then things change, and so
Yeah.
it's not like a project where the definition is there is a set end. This is a constant changing, evolving landscape where attack vectors and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and defensive postures are changing all of the time, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they do talk about the AI arms race that is underway, and I don't want to get into sci-fi, but will it end up like that? Who knows? I think it is all about creating defense in depth that is proactive rather than reactive. And many endpoint detection and response EDR systems at the moment where you've got Qualys and other tooling deployed on the endpoint, Tanium and other products that are protecting the endpoint. Um, you've got to get to the point where you're leveraging the AI functionality that comes with those tooling and configure the system to the point where it's configured to detect the adversary, to detect anomalous activity, you know, and I'll go back to my point about people being the first line of defense without proper security training, right? You could have as much tech in place as you want, but you're one click away from Skynet is coming. That's what
Yeah.
maybe, Colin, maybe, but you're one click away from introducing malware into the system. Um,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
there
So
was a question about quantum.
yes.
So we all know about quantum computers and how fast they can work, right? So if you think about um, the power of quantum to break encryption, right? Essentially, they're saying that quantum will be able to easily break current encryption standards in the future. So there's a lot going on in the background to generate quantum resilient algorithms that can be deployed that will slow it down essentially or stop it. So it's about algorithms and cryptography being designed in a different way because you've got symmetric and asymmetric encryption and how all the public and private keys work, and it's centered around all of that and the design of new quantum resilience in cryptography, and that's my limit.
It's a real specialism in itself, isn't
Well,
it?
that's a good point. It's a specialism. You can become a real specialist in
Mm.
certain areas. You can be a generalist, right? Where you can be involved in operational cyber, risk and compliance and governance and things like that. Or you can go down engineering and architecture pathways and become a real specialist in certain areas. Generally these days you're going to have a strong foundation in computer science, but then you're going to have a real strong understanding of how our vendors are delivering it.
Yeah, and then I guess we've got a whole host of roles as well, and perhaps we'll kind of segue nicely into those around things like information security and data protection, which are probably, you know, less tech heavy in terms of the requirements, in terms of skills, and perhaps suit a number of individuals that
Yeah,
really want to go down a tech route. And I know that there's been an awful lot of work done over the last 15, 20 years to really encourage people into cybersecurity, not just people coming out of school, coming out of university, but also to support people who want to career change into cyber. And part of the work that's been done, kind of probably over the last 5 years, has been around trying to professionalize cybersecurity. And I think Rachel may have put a link in the chat to the work that the UK Cybersecurity Council have done. I think they've identified that there's about 15 roles in cyber and probably fewer job families and probably about 15 roles at different levels. And also, the Chartered Institution for information security,
Dissect. Yeah.
SciSec, yes, is also a really good place to go. And they've got a series of podcasts on their website at the moment that kind of talk to you a little bit about how you might career change in
And look what I
cyber.
just happened to have, right?
Look at
So
this. Test it
next week
out.
I'm delivering Secure by Design C3 in the skills framework, and yeah, their affiliate program. I would commend the affiliate program in conjunction with what you're doing through Clickstart, which quite frankly sounds fantastic. Um, and go on YouTube, right? There's so much on YouTube as well. There's so many different ways of learning. Um, and as an employer, we look for that. We don't look for a perfect fit. Quite often, if you can tick 70% of what's required, our company and many others will then invest in you to fill the gap. So, even if you're just a hobbyist, you know, and or you're demonstrating that you are leverage, and everyone has transferable skills, Jane, right? So
Yeah.
don't discount if you're changing from one role to a cyber in your aspirations for a cyber role, you will have transferable skills from the role you did. I guarantee, no matter what role you did previously.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've learned running kind of digital retraining and upskilling programs over the last little while. Several years now, we've done very many different programs, and people do tend to undervalue their transferable
Yeah.
skills. In this program, we do have regular careers webinars taking place, and we've also got a fabulous one-to-one career coaching offer with our partner, Get My First Digital Job. So if perhaps you're struggling to think about what those skills are, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through your work, it might be through something you're doing in the rest of your life. It might be some volunteering that you do. It might be through some of the sports that you're involved with. Think quite broadly about those transferable skills. And perhaps then, as a hiring manager, Steve, while we've got you, can I just hone in a little bit more on the kind of things that you do look for? And are there particular skills and characteristics that you particularly look for in various cyber roles? What's important to you, and what are you kind of looking for from people that might be applying to DXC, for example?
Could I just quickly, first of all, look at replying to Dave though about my whimsical comment. I think what I meant there was, of course, that many people have different learning styles. So personally, if I read a book, by page five, I've fallen asleep. But if I can find the same topic on YouTube that'll talk to me about it, right, I will use that learning style. So people have lots of different learning styles,
Mm.
and therefore, use what is most appropriate to you. So back to the question of what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for people who we think will obviously fit into the company, and what does that mean, right? We are a very diverse company, right? We encourage all anyone from any background, right? Which is really good. And also, I would say just be able to demonstrate that you've got a good work ethic. That you're self-motivated, you're willing to learn, call out where you would like to be in 5 years, have an idea of why you want to join the company, what attracts the company to you, do a bit of research. It might be that geographically it works really well because of the DXC office around the corner, because there is a drive back to the office now post COVID,
Okay. Yeah, there
right?
is.
So
There is.
not every cyber role is done from your dining room table, right? Or any other room. Okay, so there is a drive back into the office to collaborate and communicate and work together as a team to deliver cyber in agile, Scrum-esque manners, ways, and working together as a team to deliver a service. That ecosystem of people, worked for a while during COVID, but now people want to, quite frankly, just want you back in the office. Yeah. So typically, we look for people who will commit to being in the office 2, 3 times a week. We're not saying 5 days a week, but there was a there was a push for that, and that's an industry trend now. Um, and just flexible and curious.
Yeah, so it's actually not the hard technical skills actually that are the things that, I mean, of course that's going to be fabulous, and that's great, but it's not just all about that, is that? And that leaves I love the fact that more and more employers are recruiting on the basis of passion and aptitude rather than just on, oh, you must have prior experience, because it's opening up, far more opportunity, isn't it, for both the
Yeah.
candidates and the businesses involved?
It's why companies like DXC and many others have their own learning platforms. So I think, Jane, remember, you've seen our learning platform. It
Yes,
has
yes.
access to all of our partner training. So you can do all of your certifications in Azure, AWS, Google. If you're if you're working as an engineer and you need to know about an operating system, you can go and do all of the Microsoft and Linux courses. If you're into databases, you know SQL and Oracle, you name it, all of the partner trainings there. And what I would say, and I'm probably an example of it, is you never stop learning, right? It's lifelong learning. I mean, I was in my 50s when I did my MSc, right? It was a bit of a shock to the system to start doing it at first, but once you get into it, you just got to continually um, learn. And if you forget about it, isn't Copilot great? I use Copilot all the time now.
Well, we have got lots of support, haven't we?
Yeah,
But to be able to help us, and I suppose that's another point, isn't it? So there is something, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's something called CyBOK, which stands for Cybersecurity Body of Knowledge, and that, and indeed in the IT field, generally, the body of knowledge is increasing at such a pace, isn't it? That I feel like lifelong learning in this field is not an option. It's something that and I don't think I've ever met anybody who works in this field actually who has not enjoyed that, the pace at which things change, and the fact that there's always something new for them to apply themselves to.
yeah,
And I guess that's part of what you were saying about that curiosity being really quite important.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So let's just take a look in the chat. Let's take a little look there first, because I'm just really keen that we have time to answer all of the questions. So there's Stuart is saying looking to enhance medical device experience with cybersecurity and AI skills to be more future focused. That sounds great. Um, John's saying that his experience is that he's faced a war. You don't have, if you don't have cybersecurity experience, but has that kind of broad experience and is looking to kind of break in and switch. What kind of things do you think he might want to focus on
Well, if you haven't,
doing?
if you haven't got, so you haven't, let's say you haven't got a degree or a formal qualification. Well, this is where the
Mm,
likes of SciSec and other bodies come in. Because if you run through the affiliate program as an entry level, for instance, and you join on their webinars, you get affiliate status, and then in parallel, that will give you an entry level into to demonstrate that you've started on that cyber journey. So there are many different ways of getting qualifications. Even the fact that you've volunteered and are doing the Kickstart, for instance,
yeah,
right, will count for something. And why do I say that? It Back to my point about the skills that we're looking for. It shows that you've actually, you're doing something. You're getting up and you're reskilling, and from that you're then applying for roles. I would say keep going. right? Don't give up. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, and I think you're right. It is about kind of being able to demonstrate that passion, isn't it? That's quite important. So what have you done to kind of pursue your interest in moving into the field? And I guess some of those formal things might be things like certifications, which we can talk about. We can move on to that so that we know that there's lots of industry certifications to support different roles. So certifications from organisations like EC Council, like CompTIA,
TIA. Yeah.
um, yeah, various. Oh, what's it called? Something squared. IC,
Yeah,
squared,
ISACA and ICS
ISACA
squared.
and
Yeah,
IC squared. Just to name a few, but there, and actually CompTIA, and I can, we can put that in the chat. Do have it looks like a tube map, and you may have seen it. It's a road map. It shows
big.
their certifications, but it also shows everybody else's as well, and it maps that by kind of job family and then by level, and that can be quite helpful. And then of course there's the academic routes in as well. You might decide to do something at college, you might decide to do a degree with a university like us, for example. So we have a cybersecurity undergraduate degree, and we have a number of virtual open days actually that are taking place at the moment that people could look at. Ryan, I think you've got a great question there, in that you're applying to entry level roles. You're finding it challenging. So perhaps, us giving you some advice and some ideas of what you might do to gain that practical experience and make yourself a stronger candidate. I think what I would say, I used to work with an organisation called the Cybersecurity Challenge, and they have donated kind of an online cyber games platform that you could get involved with. And I think Rachel's got the link for that, so hopefully she can just pop that in the chat if not already. That would be something definitely I would recommend getting involved with. The other thing I would say is have a look, because there are skills initiatives going on in the different nations and different regions. See what might be going on. So there's something called Cyber Local in England and Northern Ireland, where there are various things going on. And one of the key themes of those projects is supporting people to move into cyber and to develop their skill set in cyber. So, for example, in Lancashire, there's a tool that's been built as well that helps you understand what kind of cyber role, if any, you might be suited to. So it kind of, that's a real help. And then it will give you a diagnostic in terms of where you can go to in the local area to actually further that ambition. So those kind of initiatives are really, really good. In Scotland, the government do an awful lot around cyber skills and skills development Scotland that Steve talked about earlier. In Wales, we've got just trying to remember, Cyber College Cymru, which is a collection of colleges around the south coast of Wales that are doing lots of great work. And there's also a national cyber academy in Wales as well. I think from where I'm standing, as much as it appears quite fragmented, there's actually quite a lot of activity going on. It's just tapping into it. I mean, what would you say, Steve? What kind of things do you think
Oh
it's
my
good for
goodness.
people to get involved with?
It's everything you've said, Jane. I know it's tough out there to sometimes get a break. That there is a lot of competition. Um, our graduate, our early careers scheme, for instance, we've just taken an intake in, and every single one of them has got a cybersecurity degree, right? So,
Right.
do not rule out lifelong learning. I know it's a journey, but there's nothing better than, and I'm not just saying it, Jane, I've lived it. There's nothing better than starting a cybersecurity degree with the Open University. And I'll guarantee that when you start doing your modules, because you've done things like this course and you're curious and you're learning other stuff by many different methods, that you will draw on that knowledge and you'll be amazed just how much you know. I realized I knew a lot about cyber through delivery of project and program management. And when I started my
Yes.
MSc, yeah, there were some areas, oh, I've never heard of that before. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. And then you learn it and it fits into your system thinking. So I would, if you're not being successful, just keep exploring all avenues. Leverage, as Jane said, the programs and initiatives that are running in your respective regions. By virtue of doing that, you are demonstrating the type of skills and personality that companies like DXC want. And eventually you will get that break.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that continual learning, not only, while you're looking and you're trying to seek that, but keep your learning up, because I think not only does that demonstrate, that real passion to those hiring managers, but I think it also builds confidence. And as you were saying, it probably helps you realize actually sometimes you know more than you think you do, or there's a light bulb moment when a few
Yeah,
dots connect, for me anyway.
yeah.
There's just
No,
a
me too.
personal perspective, but I think doing any kind of that, and the fact that you guys are all here on Clickstart is a massive tick in the
Massive.
box for that. um that really helps as well. But look out for stuff that is free as well. So there are some great resources out there. Microsoft Learn, for example,
Oh,
that is, other vendors
phenomenal.
are available.
Phenomenal amount of
um
training with Microsoft is free.
and it's free. Yeah, absolutely. And you will have seen as well that there's the pledge earlier on this week that a lot of those big vendors are going to be making some AI training available for free going forwards, as well as in partnership with government. So there is quite a lot out there to be able to consume. It's sometimes it's just finding it. But what we'll do, I think Rachel's mentioned in the chat there, that we will try and pull together all of our ideas from our conversation today and share those
I like
with.
David Sinclair's point about human behavior, and I think I've touched on that today. David, you're absolutely right. I think I mentioned first line of defense always, because even the most, persistent threat, can be. They will use the easiest method to get to their gains, and that is via the human error at the moment. So you're spot on there. Um,
Yeah, I've just got there's another question here from somebody who's starting a cybersecurity degree and doing a Cisco networking course, aiming to start with a help desk job and go from there. So I guess help desk is quite interesting, isn't it? Because you start to get in a lot of queries across, all manner of things, and you can work your way up to kind of second line, third line, but I guess really what you'd be looking to do is to get some hands-on experience that's kind of behind the screen as well. But the question is, in my position, what would you focus on? Appreciate it's a broad question. I find AI particularly interesting. I suppose there's lots of different ways that you could go with that. I think I would say probably build your baseline foundational knowledge across
yeah,
all aspects of IT,
yeah,
because then you can always pivot during your career, because you've got that baseline agnostic level across things like, cloud, networking, data, service
absolutely.
management, project
And then you'll
management,
do on-the-job
whatnot.
training.
Yeah,
You know, it'd be very rare if you were left alone with fingers on the keyboards, right? Without following a strict script that's gone through change and release and has a backup plan and so on and so forth. I'm back to ITIL here, right? And four eyes on the change, right? So, just keep learning. Follow your learning path. Um, if you're doing it part time as well, personally I would focus on what scores you points. That's what I did on my MSc. Everything I did was focused on hitting those deadlines for assignments and to make sure I passed. Use your time wisely.
yeah, and I think when you're trying to break in, sometimes it's about trying to think about the companies and the type of work you want to do and the companies that you want to target, and think about how you might do that. I mean, one thing also that we haven't mentioned is Cyber First, which is an initiative that is run out of the National Cybersecurity Centre within GCHQ. it is age dependent. So it ultimately focuses on 12 to 25-year olds and really building skills. But again, it does that through activities. And there is a lot of employer links into employers via that. I recognise that's a partial suggestion, dependent on how old you are. But I think it's trying to get involved with any capture the flags or any kind of hackathons
Yes.
that and try and see, well, where are the opportunities for you to actually get in front of employers? Perhaps think about, is anybody offering mentoring opportunities as well? That gives organisations, gives hiring managers opportunities to get to know you. And it really also helps you, because the more you know about what's going on out there in terms of the landscape, what it's really like to do the job, and to have that insight, the more material you've got when you're at interview as well. So,
Mm. And network as well, Jane,
mm, yes,
absolutely. Yeah.
yes,
I see a question from Steve there about his telecommunications background and
yes.
and where to move into. So Stephen, my background when I was in signals was telecommunications, and I went into project management and then cyber. I think, as I've alluded to, I do particularly always have like network security because it's got a telecommunications element to it. So you might want to have a look at network security. That would take you down, looking at the likes of Cisco certifications, other vendors are available. So that could be one route, but there's no wrong route. There are so many different pathways, right? That, you know, start with what interests you, right? Quite frankly, and what makes you curious about learning more and understanding how things work. And if that is networks, then do that. But if it's something else, if it's data loss protection, right, and how that works, or any other cyber discipline, then look at that as well.
Good advice. Um, so yeah, there are lots of different routes in. I recognize that that is a positive, but I recognize that can sometimes be confusing. But I think there's so much work going on to try to support you to, think about what those roles are and what the pathways are into them. Um, I'm just thinking, Steve, we haven't got much time left. We've
I'm
probably
looking
got
at
another
Storm.
five
I'm looking at
minutes.
Storm's question as
Dawn's
well.
question. Yeah.
And wow, you're doing a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot on there.
There's an awful lot there, and which is fantastic. Um, how do I go about finding jobs? N- Delve into LinkedIn, right? Delve into, for instance, take DXC. If you Google DXC jobs, right, it'll take you to what jobs are available in DXC globally, right? There could be a job there for you. Have a, with those skill sets and what you're doing, right? That and I've said geography can be king at times as well, right? Your profile might fit into that 70% of what's needed, right? Have a go, right? Don't give up if you're rejected or you don't hear back, right? Because thousands might have applied, they might not have. Timing can work to your benefit as well. But start to network, start to job hunt, right? And there's lots of information out there, Jane, for techniques around job hunting as well, I think, from memory that
Yes, and we're
covered.
obviously providing some support on that. In fact,
Yeah.
we have a webinar on Tuesday. Rachel will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at midday on Tuesday the 17th, which is all about job search. And then, of course, we also have that, relationship with Get My First Digital Job for people that want, maybe their CV to be looked at, because I think it always helps, doesn't it, to have a third party look at your CV. It's one of the most difficult documents I think you can ever write as a person about yourself, isn't it? and also coaching sessions as well. So
Yeah.
there's all of that available. We are looking to run a webinar on kind of, rocking your LinkedIn profile. We're just trying to establish if we can get a LinkedIn person to come and join us on that. But we're really keen to do that to help you because, of course, LinkedIn is not only a great jobs board, but it's also a great place to kind of start networking, to be able to follow organizations or individuals that you're interested in, find out about events in your area that might be taking place that relate to computing. British Computer Society has lots of events running up and down across, the country. And as I say, stay close to things like the CISEC and the UK Cybersecurity Council, NCSC as well for initiatives going forward.
And sorry, I was just looking at the last bit of Storm there, law enforcement. So again, think about the transferable skills
Skills, yeah.
from that. Wow, right? That ticks so many cyber security boxes before you've even started.
Yeah, and there are just to let you know, Storm, there are you probably already know this, cyber security resilience centres across all of I'm not sure where you're based, sorry, but across all of certainly the regions of England and maybe further afield in the UK, because I've done some work with a couple of those, and quite often, the people working in those cybersecurity resilience centres are ex-police officers because they've got that law enforcement background, supporting people to stay out of trouble in their community, and seeking to increase the resilience of the businesses within the community. And that's kind of a nice match, kind of matching the two skill sets together. I don't know if that's of interest or of relevance to anybody, but hopefully it might be.
And I see Ryan's asked a question about a master's in cyber. Would it be beneficial? Um, I th yes, if you have the time and the commitment to do it, and hopefully, it's not too expensive. As I say, I, I was so lucky with mine that at the time, Skills Development Scotland were running a free program, so I got a free master's. It's unbelievable, which is why I try and give back as much as I can to those who are coming behind me. I think it's the least I can do, quite frankly. So I would say yes, absolutely, Ryan. Do a master's if you can in cyber.
Yeah, it's not essential, but it's going to support your understanding, isn't it? I think Rachel's saying we've just got time maybe for one more question. Oh, is it better to have an MSc in cyber or AI? I'm not sure if the answer is better. Are we able to answer that question?
I think they're different.
I do too.
AI will take you down data and AI
Data science, yeah.
science. And, in the future, I firmly believe that maybe not me, because I'm going to retire in a few years' time. However, the younger generation will be judged on how well they use AI. So everyone's going to need to learn AI. So if someone is an SME in AI, and I don't know how we're going to keep up with the pace of it, right? Um,
Me neither.
I'm sure that will be a fantastic pathway.
Yeah, and the use of AI responsibly. That this it's so nascent, isn't it, in terms of particularly our understanding of it, but also our governance of it, and that the fact that we're probably not going to be able to agree that kind of common set of rules or framework internationally either. So it's an interesting area, isn't it? But I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, and I think I see the two to be kind of intrinsically linked, actually, those areas of kind of cyber data and AI, probably at the forefront and front and center for the foreseeable.
Absolutely.
So someone's asking, do we just very quickly, we'll do a very quick try and tie all of this up. can you do a cybersecurity job 100% remotely? I'm sure that's possible, but as Steve says, there is a bit of a drive in the UK at the moment to get people back into the office, at least in a hybrid fashion. Can you get onto a master's program cyber degree with a BA honours degree? Yes, you do
Yes.
usually need a level 6 if we're talking England here, or level 10 in Scotland, before you go on to do a master's. Do you need a British passport to work in cybersecurity in the UK? Well, certainly, Steve, to work in certain parts of DXC, you would need
Yeah, let me
security
quickly cover
clearance.
that. So a lot of cyber roles that are done in the UK are supporting clients that need security clearance, people with security clearance. So it's the work has to be done on shore. Typically, if that work's done on shore and at the level of security clearance requires that you can't do it from your home, you have to go into an accredited office to work at that level. Typically, if that's not the case, companies will look for cheaper options, which is near shore and offshore. That's the reality of the world, that onshore business generally needs, security cleared people. Not always, but certainly in public sector, defence, aerospace, and central government. You need security clearance. So if you want SC, you need to have a UK passport for 5 years, and for DV, development vetting, which is the highest one, is 10 years, just for a bit of background.
That's really helpful. Thank you. That gives everybody that clear info there. Well, I think that's all we're going to have time for. But I've just loved this conversation. Thank you so much. It's been so good to have this opportunity to chat with you, and to share your insights in terms of what's going on at the moment in the sector, and your thoughts on what people need to do to break in, or indeed move their careers
Mhm.
forwards. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question in the chat, but we will address those afterwards and send those out. We'll also work on a document with all those links for you. So I hope that's been super helpful. For spending your time with us
No
today.
problem. I've put in
Um,
the chat there, I am on LinkedIn. I confess I am rubbish at it, but feel free to PM me. If I can help, I will. I am going to be incapacitated for a few months, Jane, as you know. I'm about to get a new knee, so I'm going to be bored at home. So reach out. You'll probably get a reply.
oh, that's really kind. Thanks, Steve. And
Not the
I'm
first couple
sure
of weeks because I think it's going to be sore.
you're going to be
But
in pain.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Let's say from mid-July, right?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll all take you up on that. So, yeah, thanks ever so much, everyone. Thank you, Steve. And goodbye for now. Take care.
Bye,
Bye
everybody.
bye.